WDET. I'm Tia Graham. And we've been discussing how video games contain features that mimic gambling. It encourages gamers to overspend and engage in behaviors that could lead to unhealthy habits. So, why can't players simply put the games down and stop playing? Our next guest says the games themselves are too addicting. Dr. Alok Kanodia, often referred to as Dr. K, is a psychiatrist and the founder of Healthy Gamer, a digital platform through which he encourages players to develop healthy gaming habits. He joins me now. Dr. K, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be here.
Of course. So we've been talking about how video games encourage players to take financial risks to acquire skins. They allow users to customize their experience. Can you explain why they are so significant to players?
Yeah, because I think if you sort of think about, in the real world, we attach all kinds of skins to ourselves, right? We get luxury handbags, we get jewelry. Human beings love to adorn themselves in a particular way. And when I spend 5, 10, 12 hours a day on the internet, my virtual avatar becomes just as important.
And, skins are almost like social capital. The rarer the skin, the cooler you are. It's like walking into school with a fresh pair of J's on.
Absolutely. That's spot on.
Go ahead, Dr. K.
No, I think what's happened is, this is a basic aspect of like human psychology. And video games have figured out how to basically activate that part of the brain that makes us feel special when we look a particular way.
And it's so wild to think that we have made it to this point in time where the internet, I guess you can say our virtual realities, our virtual spaces have become this almost catwalk for people to show off. So it's interesting to see the way it's developing. But a large component of video games, Dr. K, is the ability to create a separate version of yourself. Talk about the appeal of that and why it draws players in.
Yeah, so if you look at a lot of people who get, started with video games, oftentimes these people are teenagers or even younger. And I don't know if you remember what it was like to be a teenager, but it's hard, right? Your body is going through changes. You have acne. Sometimes, your growth spurt hit late, your growth spurt hit early. And the beautiful thing is that all human beings, want to be a particular way. And in the virtual world, we get to be whoever we want to. And so I get to leave my physical body behind. When I start to play a video game, when I have an avatar, they look exactly how I want them to look, not the way that genetics or my environment forces them to look.
Yeah. And in some of your content, you say that video games reroute your natural personality and wire it towards gaming. Explain what that means.
Yeah, so I think if we sort of look at the way our brains are designed, they have all these reward mechanisms. And the way that our society is structured is those reward mechanisms get activated through interaction with the real world. So a good example of this is like, if I get an A on a test, the world around me rewards me because this is a challenging thing that I accomplished. Now, the really tricky thing is that if you look at video games, they are also challenging and they give people a sense of accomplishment. So the part of our brain that feels satisfied or happy or proud when we get an A in the class is the same part of our brain that lights up when we defeat a difficult boss in a video game. So what we're starting to see with games is that they sort of basically hijack our fundamentally healthy neurocircuitry and sort of artificially activate them. And then they kind of pull us out of the real world because now I have a choice between getting this active in the game, where beating a boss, or I can study for a test, and one is fun and the other is boring.
So it's just lighting up those happy neural pathways in your brain, making you think that this is something that, we should continue to do because it makes me feel good.
Absolutely, right?
Wow. And research has shown that younger people are susceptible to addiction more broadly. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, so their brains are still developing. So if we sort of look at, our dopaminergic circuitry, which is where a lot of our addictive capabilities come from, that part of the brain is still in development. It's highly, highly sensitive to external inputs, including video games or substances. So basically, if you look at the age of first substance use, the younger you are, the more likely you are to end up with an addiction. So we're starting to see, iPad kids that are 2 years old, 4 years old, using screens, using devices, and it's absolutely shaping their brain.
I know my nieces and nephews 3 years old, and they can use an iPad better than any adult I know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely astonishing to see.
Absolutely.
So, when we think about young kids, we think about the age in which, some of these things are starting to develop themselves. And you're saying the younger they are, the younger they're using some of these technologies, whether it's gaming, whether it's tablets or whatever it may be, it's connected to an earlier addiction style. So can you talk about that a little bit and how that connects to it? Do you see in your research that we're going to see more addiction to these devices in gaming as time goes on?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're already seeing way more addiction. So the rate of video game addiction is somewhere around 12 to 22%. And just to give you a frame of reference, the rate of alcohol addiction is about 6%. And the highest studies suggest around 20%. And the really scary thing is that's across the whole population. And many 40, 50, and 60-year-olds are not addicted to video games. So once you start looking at the younger populations, the rates of addiction are even climbing.
That is actually startling statistic that you just brought to the table, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's way more of an issue than I thought. A lot of people, or at least a lot of people, don't know that this is such an issue, especially the way it is. You're listening to The Metro. I'm Tia Graham. My guest is Dr. K, psychiatrist and founder of Healthy Gamer, a platform that coaches gamers on how to engage in gaming in a healthy way. We're talking about video game addictions. Now, Dr. K, personally for yourself, you struggled with video game addiction. Mm-hmm. How did your journey with it begin?
Yeah, so I just played a lot of games growing up and then started to have problems in high school. When I went to college, when I was a freshman in college, I was playing anywhere between 16 to 20 hours a day, skipping most of my classes, got a bunch of Fs. So it was a real problem for me.
Wow. And how did it impact your work or your family? Like, what was going on with your parents when did they notice what was going on?
Yeah, so that's what's so challenging. And I wrote a book called How to Raise a Healthy Gamer that sort of outlines why it's so challenging for parents. So my parents both loved me a lot. They're both actually doctors, so they understood some stuff about medicine and addiction, but they were just outgunned, which is what a lot of parents are feeling, right? So we talk about iPad kids, but it's the world that we're raising our children in is different. And so I've sort of noticed that my parents tried their best, but they just didn't know what they were dealing with. And that's why I wrote How to Raise a Healthy Gamer, to equip parents today with an understanding of how technology is affecting their children's minds, how it's affecting their brain, and what you can do to develop healthy technology habits so you're not fighting with your kid constantly.
And Dr. K, just thinking about the book, Raising a Healthy Gamer, what are the signs of addiction? Not just as a teenager who really wants to play video games, but what are some of those signs?
Yeah, so the main thing we look for is something called impairment of function. So a lot of parents will ask me, how do I know if my kid has a problem? If it causes a problem, it is a problem. So if they're struggling with academics, their professional life, social relationships, physical health, if they're not physically active the way that they should be, mental health, and then even if it causes problems in the family, if it causes a lot of conflict at home with your social relationships, then it is a problem.
Now, I know it's, personal is person by person in terms of, overcoming addiction. How long does the process take when working through it?
Yeah, so I think it depends on kind of whether you're talking about children or adults. I think the first thing is things go slow. So a lot of people will get a good handle on addiction within about 2 years. And generally speaking, when we work with parents, we sort of recommend, slow and steady kind of wins the race. So we use something called the 25% rule, which is if you're a parent with a kid who has unhealthy technology habits, think about where you are and where you want to end up, and then cut that in half and then cut that in half again. That should be your first step. And that can take somewhere between 3 to 6 months. I think we tend to see some progress within about 12 weeks, but it can really take up to about 2 years.
And helping those through gaming addiction and overcome gaming addiction. Did your personal experience with gaming addiction inform this work?
Absolutely, right? So I knew even in 2015 when I was still training at Harvard, I talked to one of my mentors about gaming addiction. This is 10 years ago. And they didn't seem super concerned about it. And I think growing up with it myself and remembering how hard it is to control, I thought this was going to be a huge problem. And it's helped me really understand gamers and help them.
Now, Dr. K, for you personally, what mindset were you in where you were able to reflect on yourself, especially as a young man, and say, you know what, I have a problem?
Yeah, so I knew I had a problem. Actually, this is what's really interesting. A lot of parents don't realize that their kids will push back. They'll say, "Oh, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem." But oftentimes they know, and they're just afraid that their parent is going to take the game away.
Yeah.
So they can't really admit they have a problem. I was the same way. So I knew I had a problem, but I also felt like I was out of control. So there was no point in admitting it. I didn't know how to stop playing games, and it was very clear to me. I mean, I saw. I remember looking at my syllabus one day and seeing, okay, if I miss one more day of Spanish class, I'm going to lose a whole letter grade. So I'm going to drop the highest grade I can get in the class as a B. And I looked at that for about 30 seconds and decided, well, time to play video games and ignore my problems. And that's, when I knew, I was like, okay, this is a serious problem.
Yeah, especially for someone, I would assume that you took pride in your grades and the way that you performed in school.
I mean, sort of, but that's the whole problem with video games, right? Is that they give you a sense of pride, so you don't need it from the real world.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Dr. K, if I'm a concerned family member and a young relative is showing signs of video game addiction, what should I do?
So I think there are 2 or 3 things to do. The first is, instead of telling them, hey, I think this is a huge problem and you're ruining your life, so concerned family members oftentimes operate out of it like an emotional space of fear, or like fear of, oh my God, you're destroying your life. So I think what's a lot healthier is to start with something called open-ended questions. So this is to ask the person themselves, how do you feel about your gaming, right? Let them run the show in terms of the conversation, and we sort of lay out an evidence-based, neuroscience-based approach to talking to the people around you in how to raise a healthy gamer. We teach all some of these fantastic psychiatry tricks that really help people understand that they have problems, understand they have addictions, and then hopefully that's the path to overcoming them.
And Dr. K, what kinds of changes do you want to see in games themselves? You've already said they're too addicting as they are. So what can happen? What can change? What should change?
So I think the biggest thing is that right now the warning labels around games have to do with like violence, but I don't think that's the major problem that video games cause. There are several studies that suggest that violent video games don't cause violence in real life in the same way that violent movies don't cause violence in real life. What I'd really love to see is more warnings around the addictive potential of games, so that a parent should understand, okay, this game has microtransactions, this game, I don't know how you would gauge that, but I think that's really the danger we're seeing.
And Dr. K, just about the research itself, because it's still pretty new. Video games, addiction, and trying to help our society through it. Talk about what you've been able to uncover during your time researching and writing books and just trying to help people through game addiction.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to understand is that the reason that the research is relatively new is because games evolve faster than we can study them. So a research study takes 1 to 2 years to set up, about a year or 2 to run, and then about a year or 2 to do some data analysis and publish. So we're talking about like 5 years. And in that time, a video game can invade your household, cause tons of fights, and then disappear by the time, that research study is done. So something fundamentally needs to change. And I think some of the most important things that we've sort of uncovered, and this is more through clinical work than raw research, but we've done studies on our own programs that we run. And a big thing that we sort of uncovered is that a lot of things that parents do that they think are helping the problem are actually making things worse. And
go ahead, Dr. K, please.
Yeah, and the best example of this is, a lot of times parents will feel really frustrated. And then you walk up to your kid and you're like, no more games for a week, right? You've asked them to come down to dinner 15 times. They're not listening. And a lot of times what will happen is parents will set limits on gaming when they are angry. Then the problem is they haven't really thought it through. When you say no more games for a week, you didn't really think about, oh my God, I have to work late tomorrow. We have family visiting. And so they end up setting a rule that they can't enforce. And when you start creating rules that you can't enforce, you are actually training your child to ignore your words, right? Because when you say no gaming for a week, oh, mom or dad isn't going to be around, they're not going to be able to police me, so I'm going to play on the side. You're actually encouraging sort of deceptive, rebellious behavior by setting limits that you can't enforce. So there are all kinds of other tricks like that we've uncovered and are all laid out in the book.
Wow. You know, thinking about video games, it was something that I wanted to go back to briefly, but you talked about how a certain generation, a certain age group of folks aren't experiencing this gaming addiction that you're seeing in some of the younger folks. Video games have been around for decades. Atari, Mario, GoldenEye. A lot of parents grew up gaming themselves, including my parents who grew up playing video games. So they're so different now. Are there lessons from the past that apply to today's gaming environment?
I think the biggest lesson is that the games have changed, like you kind of alluded to. So I think one of the scariest things is that, parents need to prepare for games getting more addictive, not less. So you talked about games like GoldenEye or Mario or Zelda or whatever. So what's happening is, just from a competitive marketplace, people are trying to design games that players will play for years, if not decades, right? So in an effort to get people to play my game instead of somebody else's game, one of the things that I will end up oftentimes doing is making it more addictive. So I think that the main thing that parents need to understand is that technology is going to get more addictive. It's going to get more invasive. And so a lot of parents will have this attitude of, okay, I'm going to no video games in the house, no screens, no phones. But then the problem is, once your child gets older, maybe 16, 17, 18, and they do get access to technology, are they going to have the self-regulation skills in place to control themselves? So what we're a big fan of at Healthy Gamer is teach them how to swim, don't keep them out of the ocean.
Dr. Alok Kanogia, thank you so very much.
That's why it's Dr. K.
Yes, but I was just sitting here thinking like I could go on and on about what you just said and talk about, just that regulation for kids, but we have run out of time. I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Dr. K is a psychiatrist and founder of Healthy Gamer. He coaches gamers on how to engage in gaming in a healthy way. Dr. K, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Coming up, the Detroit Pistons are on track to break another franchise record, having the longest winning streak in the team's history. We will take a look back at the Bad Boys era and the magic of the 2004 championship team and how this team compares. Stay right there. This is The Metro. We'll be right back.